It began with something so small it should not have mattered. A thin rectangle of paper, the weight of a feather, drifting unnoticed from Arvin's jacket pocket when Mira picked it up from the floor. She bent down only because she didn't want anyone to step on it. That was all. Such a simple motion, and yet it opened something vast and merciless inside her life. She turned the paper over without suspicion, expecting a shopping bill, a petrol receipt, maybe a dry cleaning tag. But the embossed gold hotel logo caught the light, making her eyebrows lift. Arvin had mentioned a conference the previous week, just in passing, while searching for his tie. She had thought nothing of it, so she smiled for a second, assuming this was another predictable detail of his predictable routines. Then her gaze landed on the bold black letters. Reservation name, Mira Senegas, to, suite type, presidential suite. Check-in, note, arrived with a young woman. Son assisted with ID verification. At first, she thought she misread something. Her eyes blinked twice, then again, as if the letters would rearrange into something harmless. But they didn't. They stayed exactly as they were. Accusatory, undeniable, devastating. The room around her shrank, as though walls pushed inward. The hum of the ceiling fan grew into a sharp buzzing, slicing through her focus. The edges of her vision blurred. She read the lines again and again, 10 times, 20. Her brain refused to accept what her eyes clearly knew. Her husband, a young woman, a hotel suite, her name, her son helping. A coldness spread through her body, starting from her fingertips and threading inward until even her heartbeat felt slow and stiff. She pressed her hands against her knees to stop their trembling. The buzzing in her ears grew louder, like distant static drowning everything else. She whispered the words under her breath, using my name. Her voice cracked on the final syllable. It wasn't simply the possibility of infidelity. She had feared that for months, in the quiet corners of her mind where no one could hear her. No, what pierced her like a blade was the way Arvin had used her identity as a shield, as if she were disposable, as if her existence were nothing more than a convenient cover for his deceit. But the deepest wound came from the inclusion of her son. Arav, her stubborn, messy-haired boy, her first heartbeat outside her body, had played a part. He had helped. He had willingly handed over her ID. He had stood beside his father, validating a lie built using her name. She sat on the bed, the receipt crushed in her fist, her breath shallow and uneven. A wave of nausea washed through her, followed by another, each one heavier than the last. The slam of the front door startled her. Footsteps, familiar voices, Arvin and Arav, chatting casually as if nothing had happened, as if her world had not just split cleanly down the center. She wiped her face quickly and tucked the receipt into her bedside drawer, hiding the ember of betrayal where neither of them could see it burning. When she walked downstairs, everything looked painfully normal. Arvin laughed at something on his phone. Arav rummaged through the fridge, complaining about snacks. They looked innocent. They looked comfortable. They looked like family. But Mira felt her heartbeat stutter, painfully loud in her chest. Arvin glanced up. Rough day? Just the question. So casual, so unaware. She stared for a moment too long before answering softly. Just tired. Her son's eyes flicked up and then away quickly. Too quickly. Not teenage moodiness, not casual avoidance, guilt, fear, a secret he was not equipped to handle. Mira felt a thread of her world unravel, thin but irreversible. She cooked dinner mechanically, listening to the rhythm of normal life echo around her, while carrying a truth that burned like fire beneath her ribs. Her silence was beginning, her storm was rising. The days after the discovery stretched like fog, familiar shapes, but nothing solid enough to grasp. Morning tea tasted flavorless. The house felt cold even in bright sunlight. Every little sound startled her, as if footsteps and buzzing phones carried hidden meanings. Arvin, usually steady as a stone, now moved with an odd stiffness. He lingered near his phone, typing secretively, smiling at messages he refused to explain. He took long showers immediately after coming home, emerging with the faint scent of cologne that did not belong to him. His eyes rarely met hers. Arav was worse. He turned quiet, painfully quiet. When she asked about his day, he answered too fast, too clipped, as though he feared one extra second of conversation might reveal something. His excuses to leave the house grew flimsy. A study session here, a sudden practice there, friends she had never heard of. Mira's heart cracked a little more each time she watched him hurry past her, the boy who once told her everything, now carrying secrets like heavy stones in his pockets. Still, she asked nothing. Silence, she realized, was her armor. On a Thursday afternoon, while vacuuming the living room, she found a USB hidden between the sofa cushions. Her breath stopped. Arav likely dropped it. He handled USBs carelessly, always leaving them scattered in his backpack. For several minutes she stood still, the device in her hand weighing hope against truth. Part of her wanted to believe it was harmless. Paperwork, school assignments, anything ordinary. But hope, she reminded herself, was something she could no longer afford. She plugged it into her laptop. Pictures, blurry, grainy, but unmistakably damning. Arvin standing close to a young woman in a hotel lobby, laughing, leaning in, touching her hand. And there, in the corner of one image, was Arav, holding her ID, the laminated shine reflecting the lobby lights, handing it to someone at the counter. Mira's breath tightened painfully. She stared at the images until her tears dried into rough streaks along her cheeks. Then she gently closed the laptop and exhaled. Something inside her shifted. Not shattered. Shifted. A kind of stillness settled over her, sharp and clear like polished glass. She would not scream. She would not accuse. She would not expose her wounds to the people who created them. She needed answers, and she would get them. The next morning, after both Arvin and Arav left the house, Mira dressed in a simple white kurta and walked toward the Royal Meridian Hotel, the same name printed on the receipt that had upended her life. The lobby smelled of lilies and polished marble. The receptionist smiled politely, unaware of the storm she carried inside her. "Hello, ma'am," he said warmly. "How may I assist you?" Mira kept her voice steady. "I would like to see the details of recent reservations under my name." The confusion on his face was immediate. "Of course, Mrs. Seno. One moment." He typed quickly. His eyebrows rose. "Ma'am, you checked in twice last month. You don't remember?" Her heart felt like it dipped into ice. "Could you show me the details?" she asked softly. Something in her trembling voice softened him. He turned the screen toward her. There it was. Dates, times, and descriptions. A note that her son had confirmed her identity. A remark that she had arrived with a young woman who seemed close to the family. Her stomach twisted. Then came the final blow. "You looked happy, ma'am," the receptionist added gently. "I remember thinking what a lovely family you were." Lovely. Family. The word struck her like a slap. She requested CCTV clips. He obliged without hesitation. And Mira watched the betrayal become undeniable, watched her husband smile in ways he no longer smiled at her, watched her son hand over her ID as though it meant nothing, watched the elevator doors close behind them. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Mira felt no pain, only clarity. She walked out of the hotel with a spine straighter than it had been in years. Elegance in the face of ruined clarity. It was strange how something so devastating could also feel like release. As Mira stepped out of the hotel's glass doors, the warm air brushed her face, almost tenderly, as if the world itself exhaled with her. She had expected heartbreak to feel loud, to roar, to crack her open, to drown her. But instead, it came as stillness. Sharp, clean, almost serene. She crossed the street slowly, her pulse steady, her mind unsettlingly clear. On the opposite side stood a small cafe, its windows fogged with the warmth of ginger tea and fresh cardamom buns. She pushed open the door, the bell chiming gently above her, and settled into a corner booth by the window. She placed her phone on the table, but didn't touch it. She didn't scroll, didn't check messages, didn't replay conversations. Instead, she watched people passing on the sidewalk, students laughing, office workers hurrying, families chatting, as if nothing monumental was happening in the world. And that was the strange part. Life kept moving even when hers had tilted on its axis. Mira wrapped her hands around the warm mug of ginger tea the server brought her. The burn soothed her throat, anchored her. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the steam wash over her face. She would not beg. She would not scream. She would not confront them in a storm of emotion they didn't deserve. If betrayal was going to walk into her life uninvited, she would greet it with elegance, an elegance sharp enough to cut. She sat in the cafe until her tea ran cold, thinking, not spiraling. For the first time in months, maybe years, she wasn't drowning. She was planning. Her revenge wouldn't be the fire of rage, but the warmth of a controlled flame. Timed, deliberate, beautifully executed. When she finally stood up to leave, she felt lighter, as though she had shed a skin she no longer needed. The Mira who walked inside, a woman confused, hurt, uncertain, did not walk out again. Someone steadier took her place. Someone who saw the truth clearly. Someone who knew her worth was not tied to a faithless husband or a misguided child. This new Mira would not simply survive, she would rebuild. When Mira walked back into her home that afternoon, she did so quietly, almost invisibly. The house was empty. Good. She didn't want to see either of them, not yet. Not until she was ready. She went straight to the bedroom and opened the cupboard door slowly, as though she might find her old self hanging among her clothes. But instead, she reached for a small brown envelope tucked discreetly behind her saris. Inside were items she had ignored for years because she trusted her husband. Bank account statements, insurance papers, property documents, joint investments, mutual fund certificates, passwords she memorized long ago but never used. She laid everything on the bed, piece by piece, arranging them into neat rows. They looked sterile and bland, just paper. But now they were her armor, her leverage, her safety net. She started with the bank accounts. Arvin always believed she didn't understand finances. He had made it clear, subtly but repeatedly, that such matters were too stressful for her, that she should let him handle it because he was good with money. She smiled bitterly as she snapped pictures of each document with her phone. He wasn't careful with money. He was careless with her trust. She emailed the photos to herself, then deleted all traces from her device. She checked the joint savings account, healthy balance. She checked a second account she hadn't known existed until today, a smaller balance, but suspiciously tied to the hotel's city branch. Good. Let him think she remained unaware. Knowledge was power. Silence was strategy. She spent the entire afternoon sorting, cataloging, photographing, and rearranging. She wasn't planning to destroy him. That would require too much effort. Instead, she was preparing to free herself, completely, cleanly, without a single thread binding her to his chaos. The sun had set by the time she finished. She showered, changed into soft cotton, and headed to the kitchen to cook dinner. She chopped vegetables with steady hands. She stirred lentils in rhythmic circles. She moved like someone fully in control of herself. She served the meal when Arvin and Arav returned. They chatted casually. They laughed. They complained about traffic. They pretended everything was normal. and Mira let them. That night, as Arvin kissed her cheek half-heartedly before bed, she didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. She didn't betray even a sliver of the truth she carried. He didn't know she had already begun to slip out of his grasp. Over the next few days, her preparation continued quietly, elegantly. She opened a separate bank account in her own name and began transferring small amounts, tiny enough not to raise suspicion, but regular enough to accumulate. She packed a few essentials: clothes, her journals, family photos that mattered, small sentimental objects, and stored them discreetly at her friend Nisha's apartment under the guise of decluttering. Nisha didn't question her. Mira's mask was flawless. In these quiet days, she discovered something she hadn't expected: strength. Her grief didn't weaken her. It sharpened her. Her silence didn't trap her. It empowered her. One evening, she stood in front of the mirror, studying herself. The woman looking back wasn't fragile. She wasn't defeated. She was awakening. "You are not weak," she whispered to her reflection. "You are not forgotten. You are rising." And she meant every word. By the end of the week, the storm inside her was ready to break, not with noise, but with precision. It was time. Time for the reveal. Time to end this chapter. Time to begin her new one. The silent stage. Before the storm morning light spilled through the curtains in soft gold, painting the bedroom walls with warmth that Mira no longer felt. She sat up slowly, stretching her fingers, her mind already awake, already working. For days, she had moved like a ghost in her own home, calm, graceful, composed. Her silence had become a shield. Her routines had become her camouflage. But today felt different. There was a hum beneath her skin, a quiet anticipation, like the still air just before thunder cracks open the sky. She breathed deeply and let that feeling settle inside her. It was time to tighten the threads she'd been weaving in secret. Downstairs, she made breakfast as usual: toast, eggs, and fruit for Arvin, parathas with curd for Arav. Her hands moved with practiced ease, but her mind replayed every detail she had prepared: financial documents stored safely, keys duplicated, her new bank account growing, and her essentials hidden away at Nisha's place. The kitchen smelled of warm ghee and toasted bread when Arvin walked in. "Morning," he said, giving her a quick kiss on the head. She smiled politely. "Morning." For a man who had betrayed her so profoundly, he moved through life unbothered, almost carefree. It would have been infuriating if she still cared. But the truth was, she no longer loved him. What she felt now was something colder, quieter: detachment. Arav joined them with sleepy eyes and messy hair. "Mom, I can't find my school project file." "It's on your desk," she said without even looking up. "Blue folder." He grinned, grabbed a piece of toast, and dashed back upstairs. Mira watched him go, a pang forming in her chest. Her son. Her only child. The boy she had carried, fed, nurtured, and sacrificed for. The boy who now lied to her face and shielded his father's affair. He didn't yet understand the weight of betrayal. But he would soon, and it would reshape him. Later that afternoon, after everyone had left, Mira drove to her lawyer's office, an appointment she'd made quietly 2 days ago. She parked far from the building, preferring the short walk to clear her mind. Inside the air-conditioned lobby, she felt oddly calm, almost powerful. She seated herself on a leather chair outside the conference room, her posture elegant, her sari draped with precision. When her name was called, she rose with quiet confidence. Her lawyer, Mr. Suresh, greeted her with a firm handshake. "Mrs. Aurora, how can I assist you?" She met his gaze steadily. "I want to discuss legal separation," he blinked. "Are you sure? Has something—" "No details yet," she said softly. "Not until I've secured everything. Just tell me my options." He slid a notebook toward himself. "Very well. Let's begin." And just like that, the silent storm inside her began to take form. She asked precise questions. She took notes. She requested clear timelines. She learned about property rights, alimony structures, child custody, and shared assets. Every answer, every clause, every possibility became another puzzle piece in her growing strategy. Mr. Suresh watched her with discreet admiration. "You're remarkably composed, Mrs. Aurora. Most people in your situation unravel." Mira smiled, calm, controlled. "I did my unraveling quietly. When she left the office, she wasn't walking anymore. She was gliding. She checked her phone and saw a message from Nisha. 'Everything here. Safe. If you need to talk, I'm here.' Mira replied simply, 'Thank you. Later.' That evening, she returned home early and prepared dinner with extra care, not out of affection, but out of calculation. She needed everything to appear normal. Perfectly normal. Arvin walked in at 7:45 p.m., smelling faintly of hotel disinfectant and peppermint gum. "Busy day," he said, shrugging off his blazer. "Long week," she replied without emotion. They ate together like the picture of a stable family. Arav complained about a math test. Arvin talked about office drama. Mira listened, nodding occasionally, her face an unreadable canvas. She wondered if either of them realized the air felt different, if they sensed the calm wasn't natural, if they knew something beneath the surface had shifted. Quietly, irrevocably. Probably not. Men confident in their lies were always blind to quiet truths. At night, after everyone had fallen asleep, Mira slipped out of bed and walked to the balcony. The air was cool, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth from the previous night's drizzle. The street was quiet except for a stray dog sleeping under a street lamp. She leaned on the railing, staring at the moon. "Not yet," she whispered to herself, "but soon." Her fingers tightened around the iron bar. The truth was a powerful thing. Once revealed, it didn't simply expose others. It transformed the one who finally spoke it. She had the evidence. She had the plan. She had the courage. All she needed now was the right moment. Not just to confront them, anyone could do that, but to make sure her revelation carved itself into their memory permanently. She wanted them to remember this night for the rest of their lives, not with guilt, not with shame, but with awe. Because the woman they thought they'd broken was not just standing, she was rising. The next day, her plan began unfolding in small, subtle steps. She started by withdrawing half of the joint savings, legally allowed, entirely within her rights. She transferred it into her new account, keeping the slip tucked safely in her purse. She then visited the school for a pre-scheduled parent meeting and ensured her contact details were updated, so all communications came directly to her. She spoke to her bank manager about a locker in her name. She booked a taxi service for a specific Monday morning, 3 days from now. She paid in advance on a temporary rental studio apartment, one she could move into immediately once everything was revealed, a place she could breathe, heal, rebuild, piece by piece, quietly and precisely. She detached herself from the life that had betrayed her. And no one, not Arvin, not Arav, not a single soul noticed. That evening at home, Mira felt something shift again. A moment of clarity, a moment of decision. She stood in the kitchen doorway, watching her husband laugh at something on his phone, watching her son sit beside him, scrolling aimlessly, watching the easy comfort of their routine. They looked like a family, but they weren't. They were 3 strangers held together by silence and routine. The truth wasn't going to destroy them. It was going to reveal them. And Mira was finally ready. Tomorrow, she told herself. Tomorrow, everything begins to break open. The day cracks open. The morning began like any other, but Mira felt the air around her vibrating with quiet electricity. It was the kind of invisible tension the world holds right before a monsoon breaks. A heaviness, a pause, a held breath. She woke earlier than usual, long before the alarm clock flashed its hollow glow across the nightstand. For a few minutes, she stayed still, staring at the ceiling and listening to the familiar sounds of her house. The soft hum of the ceiling fan, the gentle breathing of Arvin beside her, the distant bark of a neighborhood dog. These ordinary sounds used to comfort her once. Now they felt like a reminder of everything false she lived alongside. Arvin shifted in his sleep, turning away from her. How fitting. Mira slipped out of bed quietly and wrapped her shawl around her shoulders. She padded softly to the kitchen and began preparing breakfast, her movements slow and precise. She cracked eggs without breaking shells, kneaded dough without sound, chopped vegetables with rhythmic precision. Her hands were calm. Her mind was steel. Today wasn't the confrontation. Not yet. Today was the preparation for the moment that would come. She plated breakfast with care, setting the table as she always did. When Arvin and Arav joined her, bleary-eyed and unaware, they assumed nothing. They grazed through meal conversations with the same dull routine, Arvin on his phone, Arav complaining about homework. Mira watched them both with a strange sense of detachment. She wasn't angry. She wasn't emotional. It felt, instead, like watching characters in a play she no longer identified with. While clearing the dishes, Arvin casually mentioned, "I'll be home late today. Some paperwork at the office." The lie slid off his tongue so easily that even Arav didn't blink. Mira smiled politely. Of course. Inside, she didn't react at all. She already knew where he'd be. She'd known for weeks. After the house emptied, she didn't sit down. She didn't rest. She didn't let her mind wander into dangerous territories of memory or heartbreak. Instead, she began completing the steps she'd laid out like beads on a string. Every task mattered. She opened the laptop and accessed the financial records she'd photographed. She rechecked dates, transfers, recurring payments. She noted down details like a detective building a case, not because she wanted to destroy him, but because she deserved to walk away without being robbed again. Then she made a call. "Good morning, Miss Mira," the bank manager said, his tone overly professional. "Your locker is ready." "Thank you," she replied, her voice smooth. "I'll be there shortly." She dressed simply but elegantly, a soft peach kurta, hair pinned neatly, eyes lined lightly. She wanted to look like a woman in control, not a woman in crisis, because that was exactly what she was. At the bank, she placed all the important documents into her locker, bank statements, insurance papers, the printed photo she had taken of the hotel entry log she discovered, and the small notebook she had filled with observations and dates. The manager didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. Mira's composure spoke for her. When she left the bank, she felt lighter. Her next stop was the rental apartment she had paid for yesterday. It was a small studio, nothing extravagant, but clean, airy, and hers. The moment she stepped inside, her chest loosened. She ran her fingers along the empty countertop, the plain table, the simple white walls. This space felt like possibility. She placed the spare keys in her purse and spent an hour arranging the few items Nisha had kept for her. A set of clean clothes, a framed photo of her parents, a notebook, her favorite shawl, and a small box of chai spices. It wasn't a home yet, but it was a beginning. When she locked the door on her way out, she felt no fear, only resolve. Later, she met with Nisha at a quiet cafe. Nisha's eyes searched her face carefully. "You're sure you're ready for everything?" she asked gently. Mira stirred her tea. "More than ready. Do you want me there? When you tell them?" Mira thought for a long moment. "No," she said finally. "This is something I need to do alone." Nisha squeezed her hand across the table. "Just remember one thing. You're not the one who broke this family. You're the one who survived it." Mira smiled faintly but said nothing. She wasn't thinking about survival anymore. She was thinking about rebirth. That afternoon, she returned home before Arav got back from school. She took a long shower, letting the warm water wash over her shoulders, smoothing the tension that had built over weeks. As she wrapped herself in a towel, she looked at her reflection, her eyes sharper, her posture straighter, her presence stronger. She barely recognized the woman she used to be. She liked the woman she was becoming. Later, when Arav returned, she greeted him warmly. "How was school?" He shrugged. "Fine." She watched him carefully. He looked tired, distracted, older somehow. He had been carrying a secret too heavy for someone his age. "Arav," she said softly, touching his shoulder. "You know you can talk to me about anything." He paused, eyes lowering. "I know, Mom," he said quietly, but he didn't say more. One day he would, when the truth opened his eyes. Evening arrived slower, heavier. At 6:15 p.m., Mira sat by the dining table with a cup of tea in her hands. She glanced at the clock every few minutes. Outside, cars passed in slow rhythms. Somewhere distant, a pressure cooker whistled from a neighbor's kitchen. At 8:42 p.m., she heard the familiar sound, the front door unlocking. Arvin stepped in, loosening his tie, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers. He smiled distractedly. "Long day." Mira nodded. "Dinner is ready." He sat. He ate. He talked about a new client. He scrolled through his phone. He was so relaxed, so certain that his world was stable under his feet. And Mira watched him, calm as still water, the plan crystallizing in her mind. Tomorrow would be the day, the final day, the day where all masks dropped. Tonight, she would sleep beside him one last time, one final night in the shell of a marriage long dead, one final evening before the dawn tore everything open. As she lay in bed, her eyes open in the darkness, she whispered to herself, "Tomorrow I rise." The unraveling begins. The next morning, Mira woke before the alarm again, long before the world outside began stirring. Dawn's pale light crawled through the curtains, soft and muted, as if hesitant to touch the edges of a day that was about to change everything. She sat up slowly, the sheets rustling around her. Arvin slept beside her, facing away, his breathing steady and careless. It struck her how peaceful he seemed, how utterly unaware, how deeply cocooned he remained inside the illusion he had crafted for himself. For a moment, she simply watched him, not with love, not with pain, but with clarity. She realized she had stopped seeking answers from him long ago. The moment she saw him at that hotel, the moment she witnessed her own child playing accomplice to his betrayal, her heart had stopped asking questions. It had simply closed the door. Today, she would open a new one. She didn't wake him. She moved quietly, gracefully, gathering her shawl and stepping out of the room. In the kitchen, sunlight began creeping across the counters as she prepared breakfast. But today, she wasn't just cooking. She was marking an ending. She made everything he liked: crispy parathas, spiced eggs, masala chai with extra cardamom. She wasn't doing it for him. She wasn't doing it for appearances. She was doing it because she wanted her final morning in this house to carry no bitterness. She wanted to leave clean. By the time Arvin and Arav joined her, the table was neatly set. The two of them ate normally, spoke normally, moved normally. They didn't suspect how fragile their world had become. Mira almost admired their oblivion. After breakfast, she turned to Arav. "You'll come straight home after school," she said softly but firmly. He blinked and nodded. "Okay. Everything fine?" "Yes," she lied. "Everything's fine." She didn't look at Arvin when she repeated the same instruction to him. "I need you both home by 7. Arvin frowned for a second, as if wondering whether she was planning something, maybe a small celebration or a special dinner. But then he shrugged and nodded. "Sure," he said. "I'll be here." She said nothing else, but inside her mind, The countdown had already begun. At 10 a.m., Mira stepped out of the house wearing her green cotton sari, the one that made her feel anchored, grounded, unmistakably herself. She carried only her purse and a notebook. Her first destination was the bank. She met with the manager, completed the paperwork for her new independent account, and ensured all documents were aligned with her separation preparations. The manager offered polite smiles, unaware that these signatures marked the end of a chapter 20 years long. Her hands didn't tremble once. From the bank, she went to the legal office again. Mr. Suresh was waiting. "Everything is moving smoothly," he confirmed, sliding a folder toward her. "Once you make the final decision and give your approval, we can file within 48 hours. Mira nodded, flipping through pages. Petition drafts, asset divisions, custody options. It didn't scare her. It didn't overwhelm her. It empowered her. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I'll confirm tonight." "Are you safe, Mira?" he asked gently, lowering his voice. "Yes," she replied. "Very." And she meant it. In the afternoon, she visited the studio apartment again. The silence of that small, clean space welcomed her like a sanctuary. She opened the windows, letting sunlight pour in. A warm breeze rustled the curtains slightly. This would be hers. Not perfect, not extravagant, but hers. She rearranged a few things, placed fresh flowers in a vase she had brought, and added a small brass dia on the counter, its presence grounding her. She stood there for a long time, watching dust particles dance in the sunlight. "I will rebuild here," she whispered. By 4 p.m., Mira was back home preparing for the evening. She didn't want a confrontation filled with emotion or chaos. She wanted calm, precision, dignity. So she set the dining table carefully, placing everything just so. She cooked simple food, rice, dal, sabzi, not to please anyone but to maintain normalcy, to keep the room still before the inevitable break. She showered. She dressed in a soft ivory sari, not festive, not mournful, just pure. Then she waited. At 6:52 p.m., the front door opened. Arav walked in first, dropping his bag near the sofa. "Mom, I'm home," he said, sounding tired but obedient. Mira nodded. "Good." At 7:06 p.m., Arvin entered, loosening his collar. "Traffic was hell," he muttered, "but I made it." Mira looked at both of them, her expression unreadable. "Sit down," she said softly. "I need to talk to you both." Arav froze mid-step. Arvin looked up sharply, sensing something for the first time. "Mira, what's wrong?" She didn't answer immediately. She waited until they were both seated. Then she walked to the side table and picked up her phone. A device she had held in silence for weeks. A device that now held the truth. She placed it in front of them. "Before I speak," she said, her voice steady as Riverstone, "I want you both to remember one thing. I already know." Arvin's shoulders stiffened. Arav's hands curled nervously. "Know what?" Arvin asked, his voice too quick, too defensive. Mira looked directly into his eyes. The old Mira would have broken here. The new Mira did not. "I know where you were," she said softly. "I know who you were with, and I know what role our son played in it." Silence. Heavy. Dense. Arvin's face drained of color. Arav lowered his head, guilt thick in the air. Mira continued, her voice even. "I have given both of you weeks, to come to me with the truth, to speak, to confess, to respect me enough to not make me carry the weight alone." Neither spoke. Neither breathed. She placed the hotel photo on the table. Arvin flinched. Arav's eyes widened. "I stood across the street that day," she said quietly. "I watched you both walk into the hotel." Arvin swallowed. "Mira, it's not— Don't lie," she interrupted, her tone soft but deadly precise. "Not tonight." Her calmness frightened them more than tears ever could. She lifted her chin. "This home, this marriage, this family, ended the moment you both chose deceit over honesty. Arav looked up, eyes glassy. Mom, I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't, she replied gently. You just revealed who you are still becoming. Then she turned to Arvin. And you revealed who you've always been. Arvin finally spoke, voice cracking. We can fix this. We can talk. No, Mira said, standing tall. You had your chance. She pointed to the neatly packed bag by the door. I'm leaving. Both faces jolted in shock. I have a place. I'm safe. I'm prepared. I'm not disappearing. I'm choosing myself. Her voice didn't waver. You will hear from my lawyer tomorrow. Until then, do not call me, do not message me, and do not send anyone after me. Arvin stood abruptly. Mira, wait. She stepped back. No more waiting, she said softly. Not for you, not for lies, not for this broken version of us. She picked up her purse. She lifted her chin one final time, and she walked out the door, not broken, not defeated, but free. The aftermath of freedom. The night air wrapped around Mira like a cool embrace as she stepped outside, closing the door behind her with a soft click. The quietness was startling. For years, every step she took was tethered to someone else. Arvin's expectations, Arav's needs, the house's rhythms. Now, as she walked down the dimly lit driveway toward the waiting cab, she felt something inside her expanding, stretching, breathing for the first time. Freedom didn't roar. It whispered. Where to, ma'am? The driver asked politely, opening the back door. Mira steadied herself, her ivory sari rustling like a quiet anthem of her rebirth. To Sunshine Residency, she said, naming her new temporary apartment. The cab rolled away from the house, and as the street lamps flickered past, Mira felt her shoulders drop, slowly, then fully. She watched the curve of the road, the familiar grocery stores, the school gate, the tiny plant nursery she loved. These were landmarks of a life she had built, pieces of a world she once fought to keep steady. But she wasn't leaving the life she built. She was leaving the people who broke it. The cab stopped in front of the modest building, and Mira stepped out with a calmness that made her feel years older and years stronger at the same time. She climbed the stairs slowly, absorbing everything, the chipped paint on the railing, the faint scent of incense from someone's home, the hum of a distant ceiling fan. When she unlocked the door and entered her small studio, she felt the air shift. The room wasn't just a space now, it was hers. Her first moment truly alone in a long time. She closed the door behind her and allowed herself to lean against it. Her breaths grew deeper, steadier. The silence wasn't heavy. It wasn't suffocating. It was beautiful. For the first time in years, no one needed her. No one demanded anything from her. No one lied to her. She walked across the room, touching the edges of her new life. Her shawl neatly folded on the chair, the brass dia she had placed earlier, glowing faintly in the dark, the soft humming of the tiny refrigerator. It was small, it was imperfect, it was peaceful. Mira exhaled. She didn't cry. The tears had dried long ago. Tonight wasn't for mourning. Tonight was for reclaiming. Hours later, after she had unpacked a few clothes and arranged her toiletries in the bathroom, she finally sat down on the edge of the bed. Her phone buzzed. She expected it. Dozens of notifications lit up the screen. 20 missed calls. Arvin, 12 missed calls. Arav messages. 47 unread. She didn't open a single one. Instead, she put her phone on silent and laid it face down. Tonight was not theirs. Tonight was hers. She stretched out on the bed and closed her eyes. The exhaustion seeped into her bones, not the exhaustion of heartbreak, but of release. She let it wash over her. She surrendered to it. Tomorrow, she would face the world. Tonight, she rested. Morning arrived gently. Light filtered through the sheer curtains of the apartment, brushing her face with warmth. Mira opened her eyes slowly. There was no weight on her chest, no anxiety twisting in her stomach. For the first time in years, she woke up peacefully. She sat up, letting her feet touch the cool floor. She made tea in the tiny kitchenette and smiled faintly at the simplicity of the moment. She didn't have to rush breakfast for anyone, didn't have to pack lunch boxes, didn't have to pretend everything was fine. Her silence today wasn't the silence of pain. It was the silence of beginning. At 9 a.m., her phone lit up again. But this time, she answered. Mira, Mr. Suresh's voice came through gently. Everything is ready. Are you prepared to move forward? Yes, she said without hesitation. File the petition. As you wish. Her marriage was now officially breaking open, not with screams or drama, but with signatures and truth. She put the phone down and looked around the apartment. The sunlight danced across the table. A bird perched on the balcony railing, chirping softly. The world kept moving, unaffected yet welcoming. Mira felt a stirring inside her, not sadness, but a strange, quiet pride. She had endured what many women were crushed under. She had walked out of a house where lies had rooted themselves. She had chosen dignity over destruction. She had chosen herself. By afternoon, she visited the market near her new place. She bought fresh vegetables, a small potted plant, a blue cushion, and a set of scented candles. She carried them up the stairs with slow, steady steps. She was crafting a home, tiny, temporary, but filled with intention. While arranging everything, she received a call from Nisha. How are you, Mira? I'm standing, Mira replied softly. That's enough, Nisha whispered. That's more than enough. Mira smiled. Come by tomorrow, she said. I want to show you the place. Of course. After ending the call, Mira lit the diya again. Its warm glow filled the room. She sat before it, feeling grounded. This wasn't the life she had imagined, but perhaps it was the life she needed. Meanwhile, back at the house she'd left behind, the cracks were widening. Arvind sat in the living room in stunned silence. The packed bag by the door felt heavier than anything he had ever lifted. The guilt he had buried for months clawed its way up his throat like a burning truth. He replayed Mira's words over and over. Her calmness had shattered him. Her silence had cut deeper than any shouted accusation. Aurav sat beside him, eyes red, confused and frightened. He didn't know whether to blame himself or his father. He didn't know whether to run or apologize. Dad, he whispered, his voice cracking, what do we do? Arvind had no answer, because for the first time in their lives, Mira was gone, and her absence was louder than her presence had ever been. That night, Mira stood on her balcony staring at the moon. The city lights glittered below her like scattered diamonds. A gentle breeze lifted the edge of her sari. She wasn't thinking about the past. She wasn't thinking about what she had lost. She was thinking about what she had reclaimed, her peace, her dignity, herself. She whispered into the cool night air, I am beginning again. And the world, in its quiet way, whispered back. The rise after ruin. The next few days unfolded like gentle waves, steady and calm, carrying Mira into a life that finally belonged to her. Each morning began with sunlight on her face and the soft bubbling of her tea kettle. Each evening ended with new silence, not the suffocating kind, but a silence that nurtured. Her tiny apartment transformed quickly, one cushion at a time, one potted plant, one piece of art on the wall. She bought a small rug in a warm maroon shade, hung a delicate string of lights along the balcony railing, and placed her books on the little shelf she bought secondhand from a market stall. Every change she made whispered the same truth. I exist. I matter. I am rebuilding. Her days were full, not rushed, not chaotic, but full of purpose. She interviewed at a design studio and, to her surprise, was asked to join immediately. Her talent, buried for years under the weight of expectations and routines, glimmered again like a gemstone pulled from dust. You bring emotion into your work, her manager told her on the first day. Mira smiled. Maybe emotion was all I ever had. Her colleagues admired her eye for detail. Younger interns approached her for guidance. People saw her not as someone's wife or someone's mother, but as a woman with her own identity, her own skill, her own voice. Each evening when she returned home, she would stand in front of the mirror and see a woman different from the one who once cried silently into pillows. This woman was grounded. This woman was brave. This woman had risen. But the most unexpected shift came from Arav. The first week in the new apartment, she heard a soft knock at her door late one evening. She opened it to find her son standing there, his shoulders slumped, eyes tired, a cheek streaked with fresh and dried tears. "Mom," he whispered, voice trembling. Mira's heart squeezed. Despite everything, this was still her child. She stepped aside and let him in without a word. Arav sat on the couch, gripping his backpack tightly. For a long time, he couldn't speak. He just breathed in shaky, staggered pulls, as if each breath hurt. "I don't know how to fix it," he finally whispered. Mira sat beside him. "Some things aren't meant to be fixed," she said softly. "Some things are meant to be rebuilt." He lifted his head. His eyes were filled with guilt, raw, young, and agonizing. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "Dad said it wasn't a big deal. He said you'd overreact. He said you wouldn't understand." Mira inhaled slowly. She didn't want to excuse him. He played a role in her pain, but she also didn't want to bury him in blame. He was a child misled by the adult he trusted most. "Arav," she said gently, taking his hand, "you didn't know the whole truth. You trusted him the way a son trusts his father. You wanted to help. And yes, it hurt me. It hurt deeply. But I know your heart." He broke then, completely. He leaned into her, sobbing openly, clutching her as if afraid she might slip away. "I want to stay with you," he whispered between breaths. "I don't want to be at the house anymore. It feels wrong." Mira stroked his hair the way she did when he was 5 and had nightmares. "You can stay," she said softly. "But here, we are honest. No secrets, no lies." He nodded fiercely, tears dripping onto her shoulder. And in that moment, amid the shaking breaths and the regained closeness, Mira felt something soften inside her. Not forgiveness of the past, but acceptance of the present. Her son hadn't lost her, and she hadn't lost him, not in the ways that truly mattered. Arav moved into her small apartment 2 days later. He slept on the narrow bed beside hers, or sometimes on the floor when he insisted on giving her space. He helped her cook, asked her about work, walked with her to the market. Their bond grew slowly, not perfectly, not instantly, but tenderly. He apologized often. She listened always. They were healing together. Meanwhile, Arvin's world collapsed with quiet violence. His messages grew desperate, his calls frantic. At first, he demanded explanations. Then he begged. Then he cried. Then he grew silent. He realized too late that he had lost the woman who once prayed for him, the woman who walked beside him, the woman who trusted him without question. Mira didn't hate him. Hatred was too heavy for someone learning to fly again. She simply chose peace over suffering, dignity over deception, freedom over loyalty to someone unworthy. She never responded to his last message, "If you ever want to come home." She had no reason to return to a place that was never truly home. Her home was where she stood now, where she breathed, where she grew. Months passed. Mira flourished. She discovered new talents. She reconnected with friends she had lost touch with. She painted again, bright canvases full of color, emotion, truth. Her studio encouraged her to present her work in a small exhibition. She hesitated at first, nervous, unsure. But when she finally stepped into the gallery, seeing her paintings displayed under warm lights, her heart expanded with pride. These were her emotions, translated, transformed, reborn. During the exhibition, a woman approached her and said, "There's so much strength in your work." Mira smiled. "It took time to find it." "It's beautiful," the woman whispered, and for the first time, Mira truly believed that about herself too. The final tie to her old life broke gently, like a thread loosening in the wind. The divorce was finalized on a summer afternoon. No dramatic scenes, no shouting, no bitterness, just signatures and truth, witnessed by law. When she walked out of the courthouse, sunlight hit her face and she closed her eyes, letting the warmth settle into her skin. Freedom didn't feel sharp anymore. It felt soft, like something she was meant to hold. Arov walked beside her, carrying her bag. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He reached for her hand and squeezed it. She squeezed back. They walked together, mother and son, toward a future unmarred by betrayal. That night, Mira lit her brass dia again. She sat near it, watching its flame dance gently. Her apartment glowed with quiet beauty, plants thriving, cushions plumped, her art on the walls, her son asleep in the next room. She felt complete. Not because life was perfect, but because she had rebuilt it with intention. She had walked through fire without burning. She had been broken without shattering. She had lost everything that hurt her and gained everything she needed. Her story wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about rebirth. She closed her eyes and whispered into the stillness, "I am enough. I was always enough." And this time, she believed it.